see you.
Avatar: Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney+. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Yeah! Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney+.
It will be an adventure for the whole family.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar: Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Ancient Egyptian society, religion and myths in particular, were held together by a strong belief in order, referred to as Maat in the ancient Egyptian language. Maat was not just a concept, but also a goddess who represented order and justice, and was often symbolized with an ostrich feather that symbolized truth. It has even been argued that Maat was so important to the ancient Egyptian worldview that the ancient Egyptian concept of religion can be defined as the realization of Maat. Although ancient Egyptian religion was not dualistic in the sense of good versus evil, there was a polar opposite concept of Maat known as Isfet. The concept of Isfet includes sickness, disease, violence, or anything that is the antithesis of order. All aspects of ancient Egyptian religion were concerned with keeping the proper order of the universe, which usually included performing the proper religious rituals. One of the most difficult concepts for modern societies to grasp concerning ancient Egyptian religion was its emphasis on rituals. When reading through most ancient Egyptian religious and mythological texts, morality seems almost entirely absent. It is not that the ancient Egyptians were immoral or ignored morality. Several morally based tales and lessons were told in ancient Egypt, but the religion itself stressed the importance of ritual over morality. Rituals played such a vital role in ancient Egyptian religion that modern scholars use the term cultic religion when referring to it. The term cult has largely taken on a pejorative meaning in modern society. Still, in this context, it merely refers to religion, where the ritual is paramount, and each of the scores of deities in a particular religion had their own following that performed specific rituals, along with the idea of my art and the emphasis on ritual. The belief in an afterlife was integral to ancient Egyptian religion. All Egyptians hoped to reach the afterlife, also known as the Field of Reeds. But to reach that place, one had to follow the natural order of things and perform the proper religious rituals. In the Egyptian afterlife, religious rituals and mythology came together to create a world that is truly exotic and foreign compared to anything in the modern world. The Egyptians were the first to articulate a belief in the afterlife in writing, and most of their religious and mythological texts concern the afterlife and how to reach it properly. The Egyptians did not view death as an end, but merely as an interruption or transformation, because they believed each person comprised 5 aspects of the self: the Kaaba name, shadow, and the physical body. Among these aspects of the human self, the Egyptians believed that the Ka, a vital spiritual force, could travel between the land of the living and the dead. Scholars know the most about ancient Egyptian mythology via the ritualistic text, often concerned with the afterlife. Unlike the Greeks and Romans, the Egyptians wrote a few narrative myth cycles, so when Egyptologists discuss or study ancient Egyptian mythology, it is difficult, if not impossible, to separate the ritualistic aspects of ancient Egyptian religion from the mythical aspects. The pyramid texts are the oldest texts about ancient Egyptian religion and mythology, making them integral to any study. The pyramid texts are a collection of over 800 spells known as utterances, inscribed inside royal pyramids' burial chambers during the 5th and 6th dynasties, circa 2345 to 2150 BC. The pyramid texts were intended to help the dead king transition from death to the afterlife and ascend to and join the sun god. And though they are not written as myths proper, the utterances relate fragments of myths that concern Osiris, the god of the dead, the divine king, and the sun god Atum-Re, among others. The idea of a divine king is another concept unique to the ancient Egyptians and crucial to their religion and mythology. Unlike their Mesopotamian contemporaries, the Egyptians believed their king was a god and needed the proper religious rituals to maintain Ma'at, or order throughout the land. Among the many epithets given to the Egyptian king, one of the most popular was the living Horus, which referred to his affiliation with the falcon-headed god of the skies and kingship. Historically speaking, the king's affiliation with Horus can be traced back to at least the early dynastic period, circa 3100 to 2686 BC, and the first part of a king's royal titular, known as the Serek, is often referred to today as the Horus name, because of the image of Horus that is perched atop the Serek. By the 4th dynasty, circa 2575 BC, Horus, central to ancient Egyptian kingship, is most colourfully depicted in one of ancient Egypt's only true narrative myths, the contendings of Horus and Seth. And though the Egyptian king was associated with Horus while he was alive, the pyramid texts depict his connections to Osiris and autumn. Osiris was the god of the dead and mummification, and before he was killed by his brother Seth, he was also associated with kingship. The Egyptians believed Osiris was vital to the dead king's resurrection, since he protected the dead and attained eternal life through death. The pyramid texts contain numerous utterances where the dead king is associated with Osiris and his afterlife attributes and utterance. 219 is very explicit in the connection between the two. O Atum, this one here is your son Osiris, whom you have caused to be restored so that he may live. If he lives, this king will live. If he does not die, this king will not die. If he is not destroyed, this king will not be destroyed. If he does not mourn, this king will not mourn. If he mourns, this king will mourn the dead kings. Otherworldly prospects were dependent upon his merging with Osiris and subsequent resurrection.
This episode is brought to you by Google Chrome. You think you know a browser, but Gemini and Chrome? That's new. It can help you with practically anything on the web, like restoring a vintage motorcycle from a 50-page restoration blog, or finally break down that long article you've had open for weeks. Gemini and Chrome is here for it. Ready to make anything online make sense? There's no place like Chrome. Check responses, setup required, compatibility and availability varies, 18+.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
And if that did not take place, the Egyptians believed the king could not attain eternal life. The pyramid. Texts give modern scholars a glimpse into the mythological and theological connections between the Egyptian king and Osiris, but the texts also reveal fragments of the mythological origins of mummification, perhaps the two most enduring aspects of ancient Egyptian culture. The pyramids and mummification also were the two most enigmatic since no known texts exist. That explains how the manufacturing process of either took place. Fortunately, even though no extant instructions about mummification exist, at least not yet, the mythological and theological origins can be more easily traced in ancient Egyptian iconography. Osiris was usually depicted as a mummy with an exposed face, and the pyramid texts provide some of the first textual references to Osiris' connection to the dead king and the mythological and theological importance of mummification and the preservation of the body. Utterance 412 gives particular attention to the latter, O flesh of the king. Do not decay, do not rot, do not smell unpleasant. Your foot will be intact, your stride will not be overstridden. You shall not tread on the corruption of Osiris. You shall reach the sky as Orion. Your soul shall be as effective as Sothis. Other utterances that reference mummification include Utterance 423, which states that the dead king shall receive your natron. That may be divine. Natron was the primary mineral the Egyptians used in mummification, which helped dry the skin. Another pyramid text describes the process in a little more graphic detail. Anubis washed my entrails, and Horus's encircling and the Osiris embalming have been carried out in Abydos. Anubis was a jackal-headed god, associated with funerary myths and cults. while Abydos was the cult center and thus the terrestrial abode of Osiris, the pyramid. Texts relate the mythological importance of Osiris and mummification to the ancient Egyptians, but the ultimate goal of the dead king was to ascend to be with the sun god. The concept of the sun god in ancient Egyptian religion and mythology can be difficult to grasp since he had different personifications and names. Atum, Re, and Atum Re are just some names attributed to the sun god in various texts. Nonetheless, the importance of the sun, god, and royal Egyptian ideology and mythology can be found in several texts. But as with Horus, a good starting point is in the king's royal titulary. The fifth name in the king's titulary is the son of Re name, because it was preceded by the Egyptian phrase, S.A. son of Re. But as important as the sun god was in the Egyptian pantheon, he played a different role than Horus, because while Horus was associated with the living king, the sun god was associated with creation. After death, the dead king coalesced with the sun god when he successfully ascended, and the mythology behind the importance of the dead king's ascension and merging with the sun. God is related in several utterances from the pyramid texts. One of the most interesting pyramid texts depicts the mythology of the dead. King's ascension is utterance 548. In this utterance, the dead king navigates a mystical ship to the netherworld, and he is accompanied by the sun god as both Re and Atum and other Egyptian deities. The text reads, "He goes aboard the bark like Re at the banks of the winding waterway. This king rose in the bark of lightning. He navigates therein to the field of lower skies at the south of the field of rushes. His hand is taken by Re. His head is lifted up by Atum. The end of his bow warp is taken by Isis. His stern warp is coiled by Nephthys. The celestial serpent has placed him at her side." Another utterance states that once the king ascended, he became a star in the sky like the sun god. The text states, "O great, one of the atoms, son of a great one of atoms, the king is a star in the sky among the gods. Tell your mother, O Shiza, that it is the king who weeps for you. It is the king who mourns for you. Give a hand to the king when he comes. O life and my wife, please bring it to the king, which Kanu made so that the king may ascend on it to the sky and escort Re in the sky." Although fragmentary, the pyramid texts guide early Egyptian mythology best, but other funerary texts written in later periods also elucidate ancient Egyptian beliefs and the afterlife, and the gods who they believed dwelled there during the 11th and 12th dynasties of the Egyptian Middle Kingdom, circa 2055 through 1795 BC. Many of the utterances of the pyramid texts were expanded and written on the coffins of royals and non-royals alike. Those collections of texts, which numbered over 1,000, are referred to today as the coffin texts, and they functioned in much the same way as the pyramid texts, as they were intended to help the deceased successfully transition into the afterlife. However, these were available to a larger audience because it was during the New Kingdom that the afterlife became accessible to the greatest part of the population, and the underworld and its gods were depicted most graphically. Beginning in the Second Intermediate Period, circa 1630 through 1520 BC. The utterances from the pyramid texts and the spells from the coffin texts were collected, expanded, and then written on papyrus scrolls, and became what are known collectively today as the Book of the Dead. The correct translation of the collection is the Book Going Forth by Day, but the title persists because it is shorter and summons images of the exotic and sometimes macabre. Since the spells from the Book of the Dead were written on papyrus rolls, it became more convenient and less expensive, so a larger number of Egyptians could rely on them and thus have access to the afterlife. The Book of the Dead offered several incantations for people journeying to the afterlife, with individual hymns and litanies dedicated to specific deities. For example, one hymn to Ra reads, "Hail thou disk, thou lord of rays who rises on the horizon day by day. Shine thou with thy beams of light upon the face of Osiris, and he who is victorious, for he singeth hymns of praise unto thee at dawn, and he maketh thee to set at eventide with words of adoration. May the soul of Osiris, Sunny the triumphant one, come forth with thee into heaven. May he go forth in the Matet boat. May he enter the port in the Sextet boat, and cleave his path among the never-resting stars in the heavens." Regarding mythology, The Book of the Dead provides some of the most graphic depictions of the afterlife and the gods who judged the dead, and extant copies of the Book of the Dead, such as the Papyrus of Ani, describe the journey to the underworld not only in words but also in art. The Egyptians believed that the text in the Book of the Dead would help the deceased avoid otherworldly traps, while the graphic images depicted what the dead would face. One image and a copy of the Book of the Dead, owned by a scribe named Ani, show the jackal-headed god Anubis weighing the deceased's heart on a scale with the feather of Mart on the opposite scale. If the deceased's heart is heavier than the feather, it is devoured by a monster, and the person suffers permanent death. But if one knows the correct spells, as Ani did, then the deceased can enter the field of reeds. The Book of the Dead opened the afterlife for many Egyptians, and in turn helped to elevate modern understanding of ancient Egyptian mythology. But one final genre of funerary texts must be examined here to better understand the complicated nature of ancient Egyptian mythology. After the Middle Kingdom, the standard method of royal burial changed from pyramids to tombs. So during the New Kingdom, most kings were buried in the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of the Nile River, across from Thebes, modern-day Luxor. In many of the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings, intricate reliefs were painted on the walls that depicted the sun, God, and the dead king on their nightly journey through the underworld, known in Egyptian as the Duat. These scenes, which vary slightly from tomb to tomb, are known collectively by modern scholars as the Book of Gates, because they depict the sun god's journey through 12 gates or pylons, one for each hour of the night as the sun, God and the dead king travel through the night. They have to contend with various demons and a giant snake known as Apophis. The Egyptians believed this journey was cyclical, as they viewed time itself. So it took place daily. Akhetaten Horizon of Aten was the capital of ancient Egypt during the reign of Akhenaten, also known as Amenhotep, the 10th ruler of the 18th dynasty of New Kingdom Egypt. And it was custom-built to be his administrative and religious capital. When Amenhotep IV began his reign, he focused on the sun god, particularly Ra-Horakhti. Ra-Horakhti was traditionally represented as a falcon-headed man, but as Amenhotep IV placed greater emphasis on the solar aspects of the god, Ra-Horakhti became known as Aten, he who rejoices on the horizon in his name of light, which is the sun's disk. The sun disk had already become familiar imagery in association with Amenhotep III, so it did not take long for Amenhotep IV to introduce a completely new divine image, and for the image of the falcon-headed man to become the non-anthropomorphic sun disk, with rays of light streaming out from it ending in hands. Thus, Aten replaced Ra-Horakhti, and cults made their final shift from the dominance of the god Amun to that of the god Aten, who was the creator now. After forming the identity of God, Aten and Aten's new place in Egyptian theology as the grand creator, Amenhotep IV, strove to establish the new cult of the Aten in the traditional religious centers of ancient Egypt, including Thebes. He even built a large temple complex to Aten in the main temple precinct of Thebes, but he met with little success as the cult of Amun-Ra was still too strong there. Thus, Amenhotep IV decided to take more drastic measures, including disbanding the priesthoods of all the gods except Aten and rediverting the funds from those cults to that of Aten. On top of that, he created a new religious center, and thus the city of Akhetaten was born. The city was built quickly, allowing the royal court to establish residence there in year 5 of Amenhotep IV's reign. Around this time, he also changed the name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, which roughly translates to beneficial of the Aten, or servant of the Aten.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's Omni-Shade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
The Prussian expedition of 1842 through 1845 first explored the city of Khartoum. It was unique because no such ancient Egyptian town had ever been found. Its unique history and short occupation allowed it to help survive the ravages of time, leaving behind a shell of what once had been. The city had a linear layout, with the more important buildings lying to either side of the Royal Road, which ran north to south. At the top of this avenue was the North Palace, where the royal family resided, and along the road was the great Temple of Aten. The South Palace, an administration centre, was at the southern end of the avenue. The town would have been somewhat unusual with only one religious cult, instead of at least a few other small temples or shrines to other gods. The class structure would also be out of proportion, with the whole royal court administrators and skilled artisans making up a large portion of the population. While Amarna was undoubtedly the new religious centre of Egypt, it needs to be clarified what its administrative duties were. Memphis had long since been the administrative capital of ancient Egypt, and while one of Akhenaten's viziers was stationed at Amarna, the other remained in Memphis, which implies that Memphis was still functioning as an administrative centre during the same period. The reigns of the 26th dynasty kings offer a possible parallel. They set up their capital in Sahur, but Memphis remained an administrative centre. Memphis lost its position as such when the advent of Alexander the Great and his creation of the city of Alexandria, which soon became the religious, cultural and political centre of the country. So while administrative duties were seen too, at Akhetaten, the administration of the whole of Egypt was still being overseen from Memphis. The royal family was always a central feature of art in Amarna, and one of ancient Egypt's most highly acclaimed pieces of art, the dauntingly beautiful bust of Nefertiti, came from the city. The art clearly demonstrates the revolutionary changes that occurred during the period. No longer is the king depicted as being strong, lithe and powerful. Instead, the rulers are depicted with a long, drooping face, a rounded, swollen belly, and curved thighs. Features that are more akin to the female form and representations of fertility than that of an Egyptian king. These changes are thought to represent the androgynous aspect of the Aten, to show him as a cosmic creator and the fertile giver of life, containing within himself both the male and the female aspects of divinity. A further representation of this aspect of God may be seen in the importance placed upon depictions of the whole royal family. King, queen and princess alike. Although not unheard of, it was uncommon for royal children to be depicted alongside their parents in official representations, but many such images are found at Amarna. Akhenaten's reign lasted for 24 years, from 1352 to 1336 BC. But the transition of power from Akhenaten to Tutankhamun is full of controversy. It is believed that Tutankhamun ascended to the Egyptian throne in 1336 BC, sometime after Akhenaten's death. At that time his royal name was Tutankhaten, not Tutankhamun. He would have only been a child of around 9 when he became Egypt's ruler, but for some reason he had no female relative acting as regent. Instead, that job went to a strong man named Horemheb, who was all too eager to do away with Akhenaten's religious changes. Within the first year of his reign, Tutankhamun's name was changed from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun, which means ruler of southern Heliopolis. This was a direct and pointed reference to Karnak and the cult of the sun god, Amun-Ra. Tutankhamun's name was not the only thing that changed, because the royal court quickly abandoned Akhetaten and moved to Memphis. Although the city continued to be occupied for a time, it quickly fell into disuse and ruin, which made clear Horemheb was quickly seeing to re-establish the old ways. In fact, Tutankhamun's short reign is often referred to as the Restoration, an apt name given the way Egyptian religion reverted to the old ways. The ancient Egyptian concepts and myths regarding life after death were quite unique. But the Egyptians did share one aspect of mythology with all other human cultures. Like other ancient civilizations and many current ones, the Egyptians believed in divine creation and had 3 different creation myths. Interestingly, ancient Egyptians found it perfectly logical to believe all or parts of the different cosmogonies simultaneously. Details of the ancient Egyptian creation myths are gleaned from fragments of the pyramid texts and other funerary texts discussed above. But it was only during the Greco-Roman period, when the foreign rulers of Egypt were more familiar with narrative myths, that creation accounts transferred into narratives. The 3 major ancient Egyptian creation myths were associated with Heliopolis, Hermopolis, and Memphis, and since the Heliopolitan creation myth is considered the oldest of the 3, it exercised a greater influence over Egyptian religion throughout the history of pharaonic culture. The Heliopolitan cosmogony is also what most people today would traditionally think of as a creation myth. Among the 3, according to the myth, the sun god Atum rose from primordial waters, and then created the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut, through masturbation. Utterance 527 of the pyramid texts described the process. Atum is he who once came into being and masturbated in on. He grasped his phallus so that he might create orgasm utilizing it, and so were the twins, Shu and Tefnut. May they put the king between them, set the king among the gods, and form the field of offerings, the primordial mound that Atum sat on when he performed. The creative act is what some scholars believe the pyramids are meant to symbolize, and after the birth of the first divine pair, Shu and Tefnut, in turn, produced Geb and Nut, who then gave birth to Osiris and his sister-wife Isis, as well as Seth and his sister, wife Nephthys. Initially, Osiris was the god of kingship until his brother Seth killed him, and the myth of Osiris is the closest thing ancient Egyptians had to what could be considered a myth. Cycle. Osiris was a popular god among all classes of Egyptians for millennia, and he syncretically merged with other gods, such as the APIs, to expand his function beyond just the god of the dead. The popularity of Osiris continued into the Ptolemaic and Roman periods, and led the historian Plutarch to write his own narrative version of the Osiris myth. Perhaps the very basic nature of the Osirian myth, brother killing brother, is why it resonated for so long throughout history. But regardless, the earliest written example of the myth comes from the pyramid texts. The utterance reads, "The Djed pillar of the day. Bark is released for its lord, and the Djed pillar of the day, Bark, is released for its protector. Isis and Nephthys come from the west and one from the east. One has a screeching falcon, one of them has a kite. They have found Osiris, his brother Seth, having laid him low in Negit. When Osiris said, 'Get away from me,' when his name became Sokar, they prevented you from rotting following this, your name of Anubis. They prevent your purification from dripping to the ground, following your name of Jackal of Upper Egypt. They prevent the smell of your corpse from becoming foul following this, your name of Horus of Haiti. They prevent Horus of the East from putrefying. They prevent Horus, Lord of Patricians, from putrefying. They prevent Horus of the Netherworld from putrefying. They prevent Horus, Lord of the Two Lands, from putrefying. And Seth will never be free from carrying you. O Osiris, wake up for Horus. Stand up against Seth. Raise yourself for Osiris, the firstborn son of Geb, at whom the two naiads tremble. The herdsman waits on you. The festival of the new moon is celebrated for you so that you may appear at the monthly festival. Fare southward to the lake and cross over the sea. For you are he who stands untiring amid Abydos. Be a spirit on the horizon. Belong enduring in Mendes. Your hand is taken by the soul of on your hand is grasped by Re. Your head is raised by too many ads, and they have set to you. At the head of the conclave of the souls of On Live, O Osiris, live and raise yourself." The utterance may need to be clarified with ancient Egyptian religion or language, especially since Egyptian myths weren't meant for popular or foreign consumption, but it is fairly straightforward. According to the myth, Seth murdered Osiris and threw his corpse into a lake, which was then revived and resurrected through the magical skills of Isis. The Heliopolitan creation myth may have been the most important cosmogony in ancient Egypt, as it clearly articulated the creation process and gave way to the popular Osirian mythic cycle. But the other two cosmogonies were also important in their time and place. The Hermopolis in the creation myth is named for the southern Egyptian city where it originated, Kem-Nu, in ancient Egyptian, and though it shares some similarities with the Heliopolitan cosmogony, it has a few fundamental differences. The Hermopolis tradition states that creation began in the primeval waters, like in the Heliopolitan myth, but 4 pairs of gods known as the Ogdoad were created. The 4 pairs are mentioned in various texts, such as spell 76 of the coffin texts. There were also variations of the Hermopolitan myth. In one version, the world emerged from a cosmic egg. In other versions, it was either a lotus or a scarab beetle that gave birth to life. The agent behind the creation in the Hermopolis myth is nebulous, because the creator is less important than the creation itself, and the order that the Ogdoad imposes on the world.
The right window treatments change everything. Your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 5-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals, free samples, zero pressure. Right now, get up to 50% off with minimum purchase, plus get a free professional measure at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.
Although the Ogdoad setup meant that no one god was theologically superior, Amun eventually rose to prominence in theologies associated with the Hermopolis cosmogony. During the Middle Kingdom, and especially the New Kingdoms, the priests of Amun elevated their deity to a level of primacy not only in the Hermopolis cosmogony, but throughout Egypt, as they combined him with the sun god Ra. After the first kings of the 18th dynasty drove the foreign Hyksos people from the Nile Delta and re-established Egyptian rule over the entire Nile Valley, Amun became the supreme god of the land, and his primary temple of Karnak in Thebes was lavishly embellished and added to by the kings of the 18th through 20th dynasties. There were 4 kings named Amenhotep. Amun and the famous Tutankhamun are at peace in the 18th dynasty, the living image of Amun. Amun took on a warrior persona during the imperialistic New Kingdom as the warrior pharaohs of the 18th and 19th dynasties waged war in Nubia and the Levant to enrich the Karnak temple. Even after the New Kingdom, Amun, Thebes, and the Karnak temple continued to play an important role in Egyptian culture and government as the high priestesses of the religious institution known as the God's Wife of Amun were recognized by new dynasties for their power and influence. The third ancient Egyptian creation myth must be considered a much later origin than the Heliopolitan and Hermopolis cosmogonies. The Memphite cosmogony is named for the city of Memphis, where it originated, but scholars know the least about this myth because only one badly preserved text is known to exist. That articulates the details. The sole text is known as the Shabaka stone for the 8th century Nubian king, which some scholars say also places the myth later. And the Memphite tradition is the least mythological of the 3 creation cosmogonies, and instead presents a theological statement of the god Patai's relationship to the other gods in the Memphite cosmogony.